Hello, I'm Dr. Daria, and you are watching What Wise Women Want here on Charlottesville's Public Access Channel 13 on Comcast. Every week we bring you panels of women discussing topics that we hope will inform you to make informed choices. Ladies, we are 52% of the population with 85% of the purchasing power. Let's use that to make differences in our world, with our families, with ourselves, and in our communities. If you'd like to learn more about the programs that we have, you can go to our website at www.whatwisewomenwant.com. Remember, wise is spelled with a Z. There you can find past programs and future programs, as well as the list of people who are on our programs and a link to tell you a little bit more about each one of them and how you can contact them if you'd like to. You can also put your questions in our website, and we will ask them for future broadcasts because this is taped. And we will use those questions in our future broadcasts. Today we're going to be talking about Food for Health Part 2. We really did not cover all of the topics in the last program that we did. And I think this program and these topics on food are really important because we eat every day. But the kinds of foods that we eat affect us. They affect our health, they affect our emotions, they affect our mental stability. And so we really need to get an understanding. A lot of the things that we learn on the television are not less in commercials are not necessarily true. And it's really hard to differentiate sometimes what's true and what's not true. So today we have a panel of experts, as we always do. To my right is Susan Dunlap, Nutrition Information Specialist for Rebecca's Natural Foods. To her right is Terri Saunders, Certified Natural Health Professional from Sunrise Herb Shop. To her right is Heather Esposito, Food and Wellness Coach for smartsexyliving. And to her right is Robyn, Coale, Registered Dietitian for the Revolution Health Center. Okay, ladies, I have 50 questions here, so last time we only got through 3 of them. So let's start today with talking about something that is permeating the stores these days, and it's the holidays, but this isn't going to be shown during the holidays, but there is sugar everywhere. There's sugar, no matter where you walk, everywhere in stores, people are passing it out. You were talking about on your website how they, health professionals are throwing them out during the Christmas parades.
Yes.
The Heart Association, the Cancer Association, and yet here we are constantly consumed in sugar. You can't go to a party, you can't go to a sporting event, you can't go anywhere without sugar being present in either in our foods or not in our, or obviously as a drink, as a drink and everything else. So, what can we do about sugar? How does it impact our life, for example? Anyway?
How doesn't it impact our lives? And it really depends on the person. It can cause, we all know that it causes diabetes. For some people, it can cause weight gain. For other people, it can cause mental issues. For me, I know when I eat sugar, I immediately get depressed. And it's not even just depressed, but like suicidal ideation. And for a long time, I just thought I was crazy. And everybody's like, you need to take medications. And I realized when I eat sugar, I feel like this. There's such a direct correlation. And that doesn't happen to everyone, but those are just some of the ways. Fatigue is huge for so many people. I wake up in the morning, I feel just as tired as when I went to bed. So those are just some of the ways. Sugar, it's in everything and it affects every single thing. So almost every health issue, you take sugar out and you can immediately feel better. Not immediately. Actually, you go through withdrawal sometimes, so let me take that back.
I know, I did that for a week.
Yeah, and speaking of withdrawal, it's because I think we downplay the effect of sugar a lot in our health. It's really acting the same way as like an opiate drug would. It stimulates the same receptors in your brain. So it's an addiction. So, whether you're addicted to cigarettes or cocaine or whatever it might be, sugar actually acts the same way in the brain as those other actual recreational drugs do. And I think we ignore that as a society.
Yeah, and there have been studies shown of rats who have the choice between cocaine and sugar water, and where they have been hooked on cocaine, they will turn to the sugar water and choose the sugar water over cocaine. Sugar really is more of a toxin than our drugs, and this is what I was saying in my most recent newsletter. It's so frustrating to me because, you know, at these events where people are handing out candy, and I'm like, no, they can't have them. And parents look at me like, I had my nephews, and they're looking at me like I'm being mean. And I'm like, you know, we don't want them to have diabetes, obesity. And they're like, but if they handed them a box of cigarettes, the parents would freak out. But it's really the same thing. And, you know, we have mineral depletion, immune suppressant. That's the biggest thing this time of year, especially by the time people watch this. It's, you know, flu season. And to me, it's not flu season, it's overdose of sugar season. Every ingestion of sugar that you have suppresses your immune system for a minimum 5 hours.
Terri, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that it's sad enough that as adults we ingest sugar, but of course that's our choice. But children are being given sugar in the school systems on a regular basis as treats, as rewards for good behavior, and that's still going on. And you know, sugar, when we talk about refined sugar, obviously that's very toxic to the system, but even honey and maple syrup and fruits and dried fruits are very high in sugar. Mango, for instance, dried mango is very, very high in sugar.
Pastas?
It's
Pizza?
well, of course, all your refined bakery products and things like that. But it's really important to watch your glycemic index in all the foods you eat, and refined sugar, of course, is very, very high glycemic index, which is a measurement.
Tell people what a glycemic index
glycemic
is.
index is a measurement for the amount of sugar in a food, which can be from all sources, refined sugar and natural. And when your glycemic index is high, of course, that predisposes you to diabetes. So even if you're eating a lot of fruit, if you think you're being good by avoiding refined sugar, but you're eating a lot of fruit, and particularly dried fruits, then your glycemic index can be very, very high. And fructose is one of the hardest kinds of sugar for the body to process because it immediately turns to fat and puts a burden on the liver.
I had a client who was tested for very high sugar, and she thought she was doing really well because she bought all of her food from the health food store, and she was drinking I don't want to say brands, but she was drinking apple juice, and she'd drink a whole quart of apple juice. So she thought she was doing the good thing, and I said, the extreme of anything is really ridiculous. And all the products that she was eating were good products, but they were all sugar. They were all high concentrations of sugar. Susan, do you want to say something?
Well, one thing is people say, well, all right, so I'm not supposed to have much sugar. How much should I actually have? And, give me a number. And I think that the number that I've seen that is the most easy to remember and pretty functional is about 25 grams a day.
Well, and can you say more of that? Because when it comes to numbers, I'm retarded, and I don't want to count my food. I want to eat. So tell me 25 grams, and I'm like that doesn't mean anything.
Well, your website says we eat 3 pounds a day. So
3 pounds a week on average as Americans. Yeah.
So what does that look like?
Well, for us, basically, one of the things to think about is I suggest to people no more than 2 fruits a day. And ideally on that, even the lower type of glycemic index fruits, such as your apples and pears and berries, those are going to be your best. But overall, for most people, they have no idea really how much sugar is in something without looking at the label. So looking at an actual label and looking at the grams of sugar is useful. But people still often don't know what grams of sugar really means. So one thing that I've found useful is to convert that grams into teaspoons. And that basic number is that for every 4 grams, it's 1 teaspoon of sugar.
Which generally, and I brought these packets, I'm more visual, so even the teaspoon doesn't always work with me, but no, it's, for every 4 grams, it's 1 of these. And so one of the things...
So 5 of those a day is enough.
That would be 20 grams.
Yeah. And when
5
you
or
say
6.
enough, like I say, it all depends on the person, and that's one of the things that we give out a number, but it's really helping the person to know for them, because 5 of these, for me, there's no way. Like I couldn't do it, and I think for a lot of people, I think it's a good way to start, and then like kind of to wean off
And
of.
then I think saying it's unique to the individual, I also think it depends on how active you are. Someone who's an endurance athlete, obviously isn't going to be affected as much by consuming more than 2 servings of fruit per day. They're burning through that before it gets, too much of a heavy burden on the system. Versus someone else who isn't active, they don't need all of that, fructose or that high quick energy sugar because they're not burning through it. Their body's not utilizing that as fuel.
But remember, we're talking about fruit here, but the fact is that in the foods that most people buy in the grocery store, it's high concentration.
Oh, yeah.
There's high fructose. Name some of the names for sugar so people know.
Even things like maltodextrin,
Yeah.
dextrin, those are actually corn derivatives, or sugar that's made out of corn, which is even worse.
Right.
Because it's highly processed. I mean, anything and everything. Evaporated cane juice sounds like really healthy. It came off the cane. That's just a really cool name for sugar, essentially. I mean, high fructose corn syrup, anything that ends in ose, sugar alcohols that end in tol, or anything.
Say some names.
Malitol, xylitol. There's fructose, sucrose.
Okay.
Invert sugar.
So all of these are sugars, and they're all found in the processed foods that we have.
Well, I have a little question there in terms of the sugar alcohols, which are your xylitol, your sorbitol, your maltitol. I mean, they are handled differently than sugar by the body, so I don't think I lump them in the same category.
Yeah, those wouldn't be...
No, I just asked for the names of sugar, that's all.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned that. Those would be sugar alcohol.
Right.
But for me, the way I tell people is to still be avoiding those because they still are really hard for the system to digest and really hard for the liver to process. Well, we don't really process them at all. So it actually just ends up being, 1, acidic to the body, and 2, pretty hard on the system. So I wouldn't say to be ingesting any sort of sugar alcohol at all. Really just looking, if you're going to do any sort of kind of 0-calorie sweetener, looking for 100% organic stevia. Would be the only thing.
Stevia is the best, in my opinion.
Yeah, that I would recommend.
Unfortunately, it has more, it has an aftertaste and things like that, so it's very difficult
Not
for people.
always. It depends
Not
on how
always.
it's processed.
Yes.
You get a good high-quality stevia.
Oh, really?
If you get pure stevia extract from the plant,
Yeah.
because a lot of stevia extracts are actually reconstituted powdered stevia. But the pure stuff is really, really good.
So you want it in liquid form.
Yeah.
Okay. So even honey is considered a high sugar.
Honey has, just 1 teaspoon of honey has 20 grams of sugar in it.
Wow.
So
Absolutely.
that's like almost your daily dose. And if you're
A
pre-diabetic,
teaspoon or a tablespoon?
a teaspoon. And if you're pre-diabetic, then 15 grams of sugar should be all you should have.
Yeah.
Well,
And so many people are these days.
I
And they
know.
don't even
And
know
well,
it.
Well, they say that 90% of people are pre-diabetic and
Right.
don't know, and about 25% of people are. And just so that people know, well, how do I even know if I'm pre-diabetic? Some of the symptoms, which can range from so many different things, but the biggest one is if you pass out on a regular basis.
That's a sure sign.
That's a good sign, If you, after 2 hours of not eating, and you want to kill someone and not feel bad about it, that's a really good sign as well.
Really? Come
on.
on.
Yes. Say from experience. If you get the shakes,
Right.
which a lot of people do, or if
Headaches.
headaches,
Headaches.
another
If you're
thing.
drinking a lot,
Yep.
Yes.
Difficulty
peeing a
sleeping.
lot.
Yes.
Yeah, going to the bathroom a lot. Those are all signs that you're pre-diabetic. If you are craving, if you're like, well, I could never give up X, Y, and Z, that usually means that'd be something that you can give up. The issue is, I know when I was diagnosed as pre-diabetic at 16, after passing out, and the doctor said, don't eat sugar. Okay, what does that really mean? And that's where, people like us come in, because, the doctors, they're great at their jobs of diagnosing, but then what happens? And it's where people like us step in to say, okay, I can teach you how to cook, because that's what's going to help people's lives, is getting back in the kitchen, out of the doctor's office and back in, back in the kitchen, going to somebody like you to say, okay, give me guidelines, then go to you, and, for you getting extra help, because they're going to need some supplements and things to really support their system.
Well, let's face it, we're pre-programmed to sugar. From, there was many generations there where people decided that breastfeeding was no longer any good, which does have sugar, but it's natural sugar, and that the milk, and then we were given formulas, and I've read labels and I've publicized labels of formulas on and on and on, and they're basically sugar. Almost every ingredient in them is sugar. So we're pre-programming ourselves to be sugar addicted from very early stage, from the very moment of life all the way through. So it's no wonder that our brain, our body craves it, or, our intestinal area craves it. Every part of our being craves it because that's what we're used to. And sugar water for babies.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
So,
as soon as they're born, they want to give that to them.
Exactly.
And even, because I don't want us to feel like we're putting all the blame on the food companies, just by nature, like you said, mother's breast milk is sweet because it helps to create the sucking reflex. So even for those who have been, my nephew is breastfed, and solely breastfed, that kid has a sweet tooth, like crazy, So some of it's the constitution, and you were born, even whether you're breastfed or not. And you could have been completely breastfed, but then fed, your first couple of foods is sugar, and that sets you up, for how you're going to, the foods that you're going to crave for the rest of your life.
Susan, how would you help somebody who has a sugar addiction when they came to you and Rebecca's? What would you do?
Well, one of the first things is ask them how much protein they're getting.
Okay.
Because so many times people are substituting the carbohydrates for their good healthy fats and their good healthy proteins. And if you can get that established so that they have a more stable blood sugar because of having fat, fiber, and protein, those three things, then that can set you up for the ability to say, okay, I'm not craving it because my blood sugar has dropped and I'm just like this and I can't think straight. But now I can say this is a choice. And then you can make an intellectual decision, and that's a whole different thing than an emotional and a physical craving kind of situation.
What do you say to vegetarians?
There's plenty of protein there. There's no problem.
I want you to talk about that because I'm being the devil's advocate here because when you say protein, people think of meat and animal products and things like that. So tell us how protein is, how do we get protein without having beef or chicken?
Yeah, so if you're not eating meat or if you're not eating dairy or anything else, you can get plenty of protein through plants. So the obvious to vegetarians, I guess, is beans and lentils, getting it from there. Then nuts and seeds are going to give you plenty of protein. But vegetables, eating them in enough quantity, I wouldn't suggest or recommend eating only vegetables. But vegetables are 40 to 50% protein. And people don't realize that, You eat 100 calories of broccoli, you've got 8 grams of protein, versus 100 calories of steak, and you've got 5 or 6. So you're going to be getting plenty of protein through not eating animal products, beans and lentils and those sorts of things.
Can I add something to that? One of the things that people don't realize is unless they soak their grains, beans, nuts, and seeds for 6 to 8 hours beforehand and rinse them off, there's something called enzyme inhibitors in those foods that prevent us from digesting them.
Phytic acids?
Phytic acids, exactly. Yeah. And basically these are all seeds that we're talking about of some kind, and the coating of these beans, grains, nuts, and seeds actually prevent those seeds from sprouting until they are in nature, fall from the plant, and the moist spring rains come, and then those enzyme inhibitors are washed away, and then those things can sprout. So there's a protection on the coating of these foods that prevents us from digesting them. So when birds eat seeds, what happens is they have a little gullet in their neck where the seeds will sit for a period of time. The enzyme inhibitors are released, and then they swallow it, and then these things are pre-digested. So if we're going to eat these foods, and this is what our ancestors did too, then we need to make sure that we prepare them the right way.
I'd like to ask a question about that because at times I forget to do it myself. If I
you have to plan ahead.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Well, when you have a busy life, sometimes it's hard. So I want to ask this question: if I put my lentils, for example, in a crock pot, and I put it on low, and it cooks, for the whole day, will that get the enzymes working?
You should really soak your beans and lentils first before you cook them.
And do you wash
it? Helps.
Do you rinse it as well?
It does help, and then rinse them because then you're rinsing those enzyme inhibitors off.
After you soak them, do you rinse it?
Yes.
Then you rinse it. Okay, so in other words, crock pots aren't going to alleviate leaving it overnight to soak.
Right. And a little trick when you're cooking beans if you put some seaweed, I like to put kombu or kelp in the pot, it actually helps to prevent you from having gas, because a lot of people will have gas when they eat beans, so it helps you to digest it better.
Okay, so you were talking about, what were the 3 things that you tell people to eat?
Protein, fat, and fiber.
Protein, fat, and fiber. Okay. There was a recent book that just came out. Sorry, I don't remember the title, but you're bringing it up for me. And it said the reason that Americans are overweight is because of fat, salt, sugar. Were those the 3 things that they said in the book that were contributing to the obesity in America? So if we don't have, our diets are full of fat, sugar, and salt. So I thought those things were good for us.
What
Good
kind
fats.
of fat?
Oh,
good
they
fats
jump.
are good for you.
Most Americans are getting a ton of cholesterol and saturated fat, or very, very processed oils like soybean oil or corn oil or any sort of other oils that are used in processed foods. What we're not getting, so we're getting tons of these omega-6 fats that are these inflammatory fats to our system. And we aren't getting enough of these omega-3 fats.
All right, what's an omega-3 fat?
An omega-3 fat is what you're going to find in like avocado, or avocados can be more of a monounsaturated fat, but primarily chia seeds, flax seeds, and hemp seeds, or flax oil. Those things are going to have your omega-3 fats. And what's happened is that historically, humans were getting a 2-to-1, 1-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. Well, now we're getting about a 15-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. And so we have all of these inflammatory fats and barely any anti-inflammatory fats. And that's where the problem is lying with fats. Fats are extremely healthy. It's how we make, they're the backbone for all of our hormones, too. So that we need them for our diet. And actually, I would certainly recommend people get 25-30% of their diet from healthy fats. But what's happening is that we aren't getting the healthy fats. So they're actually these inflammatory fats that kind of wreak havoc on our system. And
so avocados you named, is
then
coconut oil? Or?
Yeah, so you have your omega-3 fatty acids and then also your good fats, monounsaturated fats. And those are almonds and your olive oil and avocado and walnuts. Coconut oil is actually a whole entire different kind of fat. It's a saturated medium chain triglyceride.
Is that good?
That is a good thing.
Yes.
So coconut oil is the only saturated fat that's actually very healthy. And it's because our body utilizes it very quickly as an immediate source of fuel. So it's used kind of like a carbohydrate would be. It goes straight to the liver and it's burned up as energy.
So all those seeds and nuts that she mentioned all need to be soaked too, the almonds, the walnuts?
They should be. Well, actually, hemp seeds are an exception. You don't have to soak hemp seeds. But I want to say also, if you're not a vegetarian, of course, there's fish oil, which is a great source of omega-3s.
Yeah. And there's also, if you
krill
are,
oil.
and those, but then if you are, I don't know if are we allowed to say brands or no?
Well, no.
Okay.
I'd rather you didn't.
Well, you can go to Rebecca's, and they have plant-based oils that you can get as well.
They have tons of omega-3s in them. Because essentially, too, fish oils, I don't want to open up another can of worms, but fish are getting those omega-3s from seaweed in the sea. So, they're getting it from another source, namely plants, that then, it's the same way that cows and stuff get their protein from plants, and then we eat the cow. So you can actually go to the immediate source of omega-3.
I was going to say, so in other words, we should eat seaweed.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's not the seaweed, it's the plankton itself.
The plankton.
It's a little different thing than the seaweed. So it's not something we're likely to be able to get in terms of a quantity that would actually give us enough directly. What we get when we get a supplement is something that's been concentrated and manipulated somewhat so that you can get it in a form that will give you enough to achieve it. Another source that people don't realize is that beef or other cattle or wild animals that have been raised on pasture and are eating the grasses from which the omega-3s can be derived, they themselves actually have a significant amount of omega-3s in them, just like we think of fish oils or some of the other plant-based oils.
Okay. CLAs.
The CLA and then some
What's
of the other
CLA?
omega-3. CLA is conjugated linoleic acid, which is another good fat.
I have that in my...
And that's found abundantly in raw butter.
Oh, so you're saying raw butter is good for you?
I think so.
Okay.
From pasture-fed animals.
Okay.
Would that be
Yeah.
ghee?
Ghee is not the same.
What is ghee then? The difference between raw butter and ghee.
What happens when you clarify butter. It's what is left over. I prefer raw butter, straight from a cow.
See, I eat ghee. So.
People don't realize that there's a huge difference between pasteurized and unpasteurized dairy products, because pasteurized literally means heating. And for food to be pasteurized, it has to be heated to a temperature that's high enough to destroy the enzymes that would enable you to digest it. So you can be eating organic dairy products and it'll still be pasteurized and you will not be able to digest it very well.
Because it doesn't have
It
the
destroys,
enzymes.
like, for instance, lactose. Lactose is a sugar in dairy products, and lactase is the enzyme that enables us to break it down. So if you're eating raw milk, for instance, there's enough lactase in there for you to be able to digest that lactose. However, if you are drinking or eating pasteurized dairy products, then the lactase isn't there, and so a lot of people need to take lactase enzymes, digestive enzymes, to help them to digest it. And raw butter is great because it actually heals the stomach lining, and the conjugated linoleic acid is really important for so many things. One of the things it does is it literally melts cellulite away.
Really?
So for all the women out there, eat raw butter. And it's just very, very tasty. And the CLA, the conjugated linoleic acid, makes it, the butter, a yellow color, a bright yellow color. And when you go to the store and buy pasteurized butter and it's bright yellow, usually it's colored.
Right. Heather, what were you going to say?
With coloring.
Well, I was going to say, you brought up a great point that we see all these marketing things and think, oh, it's ultra pasteurized, it must be good, or oh, it's this or that. And I'm thinking, if I'm watching this, what's my big takeaway? Because I don't know anything about, I know I need to eat better, but CLAs and TLAs and omega-3s and 6, like all this stuff, it's a lot of information. So just to really simplify it is, if it has to tell you how good it is for you on the packaging, it's probably not that good for you. The less braggadocious it is, probably the better off it is. So getting back to eating
explain
foods.
what you mean by that.
Well, so, we go
What's
to a store.
braggadocious look like?
Yeah, you go into a store and it's, you see this box and it's like, has all of these words on it, whole grain, organic, ultra pasteurized, fortified, natural, all of these things. We think, oh, okay, it must be good for us, And it's, those poor vegetables that are just
lonely
sitting
carrot
on the shelf, not saying anything. That's the kind of food that you want to go to. It's just like, if you're going to go on a date, if the person comes in and tells you, well, I'd make a great wife because da-da-da-da-da, you kind of don't like that person. They usually don't own up to all those things.
Yeah.
It's the person who doesn't tell you how great they are that ends up having the great qualities. And it's the same thing with food. It is. There's so much information out there of how much stuff we need, but if we really simplify it to, is it food? Does it come from a plant, or is it made in a plant? And if it's made in a plant, then it's probably not that great for us. But if it's made from a plant, it's a better option for us.
Well, we're going to take a little bit of break to tell you what you're watching. This is What Wise Women Want from Charlottesville's public access Comcast Channel 13. Today we're talking about part 2 of our Food for Health, as you could possibly imagine from this conversation. And with me today, I'm Dr. Daria Brzezinski. To my right is Susan Dunlap, Nutrition Information Specialist at Rebecca's Natural Foods. Terri Saunders, a certified natural health professional from Sunrise Herb Shop. Heather Esposito, food and wellness coach from smartsexyliving. And Robyn Coale, from a registered dietitian at the Revolution Health Center. Okay, so, I know what happens to, like, my clients alone when I talk to them about food. They are so overwhelmed by all the information. And it kind of reminds me of, we did a program on the Affordable Care Act. And I realized during that whole process that the insurance companies are the ones who are making everybody all paranoid about the things that are going on and using scare tactics. And so, in the food industry, we have all these people who are talking about natural and organic, and this is good for you. And, And here we are talking about natural foods that are, much more beneficial for us than all these packaged products. So, but one of them that's packaged, so to speak, is fermented foods. Talk to us a little bit about what fermented foods are. Now, as the ethnicity I am, I grew up on fermented foods. So I loved fermented foods my entire life. But tell us what they are.
Well, fermented foods have been, with us for centuries, probably thousands of years. It's before we had refrigeration, our ancestors actually fermented the food to preserve them through the winter months, because of course nothing was really growing during the winter in the colder climates. And the fermentation process is really interesting. If you take any kind, even meats can be fermented. Any kind of food, whether it's a meat or fruit or vegetable, has something called Lactobacillus acidophilus, or Lactobacillus bacteria, growing on it. And under certain conditions, usually what they would do is they would take the food and pound it so it's nice and juicy and put them in crocks and let them sit for a period of time. And that particular bacteria would produce lactic acid, which would naturally preserve the food. And in the process, all of these wonderful enzymes would be created, and all of these good, what we call probiotics, the good bacteria that we need in our digestive systems to create a healthy immune system, were inherently in that food. In fact, 85% of our immune system is comprised by the probiotics that are in our gut, so to speak, if we have them. And so if we eat fermented foods, then we naturally have a strong immune system. And what's interesting, we were talking earlier about sugar, and when you eat fermented foods, so some examples would be sauerkraut, that was very popular in Europe. In fact, Captain Cook had, hundreds of barrels of sauerkraut packed on his ship. So when the sailors ate this, they never got scurvy. Scurvy was something that a lot of sailors would get on the high seas because they didn't have access to citrus fruit, which is naturally high in vitamin C. And all cultures around the world had some kind of fermented food. We have miso in Asia. We had kimchi in Korea. And I don't know if you guys remember a few years ago the avian flu scare, which was primarily confined to chickens and fowl, poultry. And what they did to heal the chickens is they gave them juice of kimchi, and that completely healed them. Wow. So
are pickles fermented foods?
Pickles are different. They're actually cured in vinegar, and they don't have the same properties. They don't have the same good bacteria.
So there's no vinegar in sauerkraut?
No.
Okay. You want to make sure you're getting an unpasteurized sauerkraut.
Very good point.
Again.
Yeah. So when you buy fermented foods, make sure you read the label to see that it's not.
Yeah, you can't buy like canned sauerkraut or something. It's usually refrigerated.
Well, when you say not canned, just make sure it's in a glass.
Yes.
In glass rather than
yes.
can.
And then there's the traditional foods from both the dairy end, such as yogurt and kefir, which of course many people are familiar with yogurt. And then you've also got traditional foods like wine and beer, which are traditional fermented foods. And even coffee actually begins as a fermented product.
Really?
By the time it's roasted, you're going to lose a lot of those properties. But it's interesting that part of our culture, in the way that foods are given extra flavor in addition to the good probiotic qualities, often comes from the fermentation process.
And chocolate and ketchup was originally fermented as well. And when you're eating those fermented foods, not only does it boost your immune system.
But it isn't now, though.
No. But it depends on how it's prepared. But in addition to boosting your immune system, when you eat fermented foods, it actually cuts your sugar cravings dramatically. Have you found that too? Just amazing. And also cravings for caffeine. And the fermented foods they actually devour the sugar. That's their food. And when you prepare fermented foods, you usually add a little bit of, if it's kombucha, you're adding sugar. Kombucha is a fermented beverage. Or honey. Or some foods are naturally sweet,
Okay,
like
I
fruits,
have a
and you don't
question
need
to
to add
ask
anything.
with this fermentation, because I had trouble with yeast eating some fermented foods. So what does that mean?
What do you mean trouble with
Yeah.
yeast?
I would get it, yeast infection or
Sure.
buildup from eating fermented food. Well, kombucha was the one that really triggered it. So what is that, is that the body cleaning itself, or is that an imbalance, or what is
Could be
that?
a detox, or it could be that the kombucha just wasn't fermented enough.
Ah.
When you make it at home, my experience is making it home, it's just never as fizzy or as fermented as when
Okay.
you buy it.
Okay.
I just haven't spent enough time really researching that. I'm sure you can do it, but that's possible. And did you have that experience when you had sauerkraut or fermented
No.
vegetables?
No.
So it's a little
Just the
different.
kombucha.
Yeah.
And then, it could have been, because kombucha is made with a little bit of fruit juice and a ton of sugar
I
to
think
get
that's
it
what it
fermented.
is. That was
Yeah.
the sugar.
Yeah.
The combination with that was the sugar. So she hinted about enzymes. What are enzymes? Tell people what enzymes are. Anybody have that?
Well,
Robyn?
So enzymes are, we have lots and lots and lots of them in our body. And enzymes basically allow reactions in the body to occur.
Okay.
So if we need to digest something, we'll need an enzyme for it. If we need to convert a nutrient to another nutrient, we'll need an enzyme for it. They're kind of like the catalyst to a lot of, or if not, the majority of our biological reactions that are going on inside of our body. So they're kind of essential to life. They're made up of protein. And most importantly, when we're talking about food and stuff, we need these digestive enzymes. That comes back again to gut health and keeping your gut healthy and making sure that, we're getting all the good probiotics and stuff to keep our gut healthy. And then also that the digestive enzymes in our food are actually available when we eat them. So that's why it's a good idea to get a good mixture of raw and cooked vegetables and other foods, because when something's been heated, the enzymes are broken down. So that's why we need some raw, I always say make sure at least half of your meal is raw, so you have those digestive enzymes to begin to break down your food.
People
would agree
ideas
with
of
that.
raw as a
Definitely.
salad. You mean more than this
Yeah.
lettuce in a salad? Like,
Yeah.
eating a cucumber or eating...
anything that has not been heated. Essentially raw is anything below 118 degrees. But anything that has
So that nuts and things like that
Yeah.
constitute raw. Okay.
So let's say that you're eating even enchiladas for dinner or something. Eating that with a big salad will give you all the digestive enzymes
Okay.
to be able to digest that. And, you've got some alkalinity in that too. That's a whole other conversation. But being able to...
That was one of my questions.
I would
So-
recommend taking digestive enzymes.
Well, I was
Or
about
doing
to
that
ask.
with
I
any
was
kind
about
of
to
cooked
ask
food.
you about that
Yeah.
because I know you have. So, are digestive enzymes and probiotics the same thing?
No.
Okay, tell us the difference.
Your digestive enzymes are the components, as she was saying, that actually help to break the foods down themselves.
Okay.
And there are enzymes that are specific for each type of food. So ones that work on proteins, ones that work on carbohydrates, ones that work on sugar, and so forth. And you can buy a supplement that has all those together. And if someone has a particular sensitivity, knowing that they don't digest fats well particularly, then they might take a supplement that has extra of the lipase, which helps to break down the fats, for instance. And if you're in a situation you're going out to eat, or you just know that your system is tending to be weak in that, and you're maybe in a transition diet and you aren't eating a lot of raw food at the moment, those digestive enzymes will help to make sure that you can assimilate the foods as best that you can. And then you've got your probiotics, which are your good bacteria. It just literally means pro-life, good bacteria. And those will help to break the food down in the intestinal system, but from a different perspective.
So, probiotics and enzymes are two different things.
Right.
So just like for anybody watching me, is that a lot of times when people start to switch to a more whole foods diet, they're eating more beans, they're eating more plants, and then they're like, well, I just have gas all the time.
Yeah.
I don't want to do
Yeah.
this. This isn't good. If they came to you, what would you say?
And that's the first thing I would look at is the digestive enzymes and say, here's a situation where you're going to need an assist until your body actually starts to ramp up its own production and then make more of the enzymes that it needs to do that. And there are situations also where people may have had a gallbladder removed and they can't produce some of the enzymes that they need to help things down. So that's where it really becomes very essential to support the body with enzymes that it can no longer produce.
So you can't get these things just from food alone, is what you're saying.
When you eat a raw food, there are enzymes in that food that are there to help you digest the food. When an apple falls from a tree and there's a bruise on it, those are enzymes that are starting to decompose that apple. When you eat a cooked apple or a cooked vegetable, what happens is there's no enzymes in that food or even meat, and so your pancreas has to produce enzymes to break down that food. Now, your pancreas was not designed primarily to produce digestive enzymes. It produces enzymes that help with every metabolic function in your body. Everything that happens, as Robyn was saying, in your body needs an enzyme as a catalyst to make it happen. So if you eat primarily cooked food, and in the wintertime we naturally gravitate towards warming soups and things like that, if you're not taking digestive enzymes with that cooked food, then your pancreas has to work really hard. And over a period of many years, the pancreas gets enlarged because it's working so hard. And eventually you can end up with pancreatitis, for instance. So I'm just a real advocate for taking digestive enzymes with all your cooked food. And this is interesting, too. It was discovered in the 1980s. A Swiss scientist discovered a particular process called digestive leukocytosis, which happens when you eat cooked food. So leukocytosis is a process where the body actually mobilizes the immune system to send immune cells into the bloodstream to fight foreign invaders. And when you eat a cooked meal, that's what happens. Your body mobilizes the immune system to send these immune cells, the B cells and the T and the killer cells and all those things, into the bloodstream to try to fight what it considers to be a foreign invader, which is the cooked food that has actually penetrated the intestinal wall and gotten into the bloodstream. So
so there's a lot of people who don't like vegetables, who don't like raw. So what can we do to help them to get this raw vegetable in their system?
This is a huge thing for me because I was the worst eater as a kid, so I so relate to this. And one, it's just challenge your thinking of it may not be the vegetable that you don't like, it's how it's prepared. That could be one thing. And also, because of all the sugar that we've eaten, our taste buds are literally immature. So we have to give ourselves time to be able to help it grow up a little bit. And I just had this experience yesterday. I don't like eggplant. I've just never liked eggplant. And we were at a local restaurant. It was amazing. And I was like, well, I like eggplant like this. So some of it is just in how it's prepared. So trying it different ways. Not to say, oh, I hate Brussels sprouts. Oh, I don't like how they're prepared this way. Let me try to prepare it a different way. I think that's one of the biggest things is understanding that it's not maybe that food, it's just how it's prepared.
Well, I'm talking about raw now.
So even raw vegetables, I mean, I'm the first one to say if I had to choose between all the foods, I want to be like, please give me raw carrots and celery, So it's, but I think once your palate starts to change, like Heather's saying, once we actually detox the system of all the sugar and all the processed foods and all these really addictive substances that are in our foods, once the system starts to get cleansed, your palate completely changes. And so you actually then, I grew up in the Midwest, in a single parent home, I was not eating raw kale salad, I'll tell you that. And so my palate's definitely shifted, and even over the past 3 years, now I actually crave things like raw kale salad, which is actually delicious once you start to really prepare it and put yummy things on it and all kinds of stuff. But I think just having patience with yourself and knowing that when you start to change your diet and shift towards a more plant-based, even raw or plant-strong, raw sort of diet, and just incorporating more raw foods, think of yourself as like a student. And you didn't start out in first grade with a college degree, right? You went through all these different steps to get your degree. Same sort of thing, taking it as a practice, and the more you practice and enjoying the better. So I think just being patient with yourself and really just allowing yourself, one, to prepare them so they taste good, like steamed versus roasted Brussels sprouts.
See, and I would take roasted Brussels sprouts over steamed any day.
Yeah, that's
So roasted. How do you roast a Brussels sprout?
Oh God!
I mean, I've only steamed them before.
You just slice them up and literally. I like to throw olive oil, coconut oil on them and throw them
in the oven.
Yeah.
A little bit of salt and pepper. Chop the little stem off the bottom and cut it in half.
Roasted vegetables in general are sweeter.
Okay, but they're still heated, aren't we? Breaking them down, putting them in the oven.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I've had, like,
Of course, you can't eat raw Brussels sprouts.
No, yes, you
Yes,
can.
you can.
Like, I have this great raw Brussels sprout and kale salad
Really?
on my website, and it's so good. And like people are just so
So you
surprised
season it, right?
because we think Brussels sprouts are in this. You know, I grew
Right.
up calling them Barbie heads because they're like the size.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I hated them, but now, like, I just made them the other day, and we're like, why did we eat those grown up? Like, chopping them, we don't think to chop them up.
No,
and
I
to,
don't
like,
think
shave
you
them.
do either, no.
Yeah, and you can eat them raw that way. And
Okay.
They're so good.
They're
All right,
delicious.
there's a topic we keep avoiding constantly for our last, part of our program here, and that is detox. And you all know I spent a week in detox this past week. We've really, when people start changing their diet, symptoms start happening that they have no idea what's going on. So we really need to tell people the reality of detox. So does anybody want to start with that topic?
That's one of my favorite subjects.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so that detoxification is a very important part of the healing process. And when people have not had good nutrition, then their body doesn't really have the energy to mobilize those toxins and get rid of them through the eliminative organs. And we have different ways that we eliminate toxins. Mucus is a very common way. Mucus is just undigested protein acids and bacteria and viruses and yeast and fungus and all those pathogenic organisms that the body wants to get rid of. It creates mucus to get rid of it. So when you have a cold, for instance, that's your body's way of detoxifying. And when you take over-the-counter medications to suppress that natural response, like antihistamines, Sudafed, and all those drugs that stop the natural detox response, then what happens to those toxins? They're not exiting your body; they're going deeper and deeper into the tissues. And I've had people that have said, I never get sick, I never get cold or anything, and now I have cancer. What happened? And a lot of times those people are not very good at mobilizing their body to eliminate those toxins, and they build up and cause aberrations in the cells. So detox is good. Now, when you start eating highly nutritionally dense food, your body gets the nutrition it needs and the energy it needs to finally detoxify. And so it's very common when you switch to a really healthy, nutritionally dense diet that your body will detoxify. And if you get headachy, or cold or flu-like symptoms, you're really, really tired, or even intestinal distress, it seems like intestinal distress, it's just your body's way of throwing those toxins out. And getting rid of them.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. I think we have to let people know. Like when my clients, I do a 14-day sugar detox. With people, I run them December and January. And when people come to me and say, "Oh my gosh, I have this headache, it's terrible," I'm like, "Yay, that's awesome!" And they're like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Right, because your body's letting go of the old stuff and letting the new stuff come in." So when we look at it as your body is saying yes to all of these things instead of, "Oh, I feel terrible," it's, "Oh my gosh, look at how great you're going to be feeling because all of these terrible things are coming out."
It means they're strong enough to go through it.
Yeah.
And it usually is temporary. It's just a couple days to maybe a week to 2 weeks at the most, usually.
It can definitely be a long period, but you come out of it, feeling amazing. And at the same time, you have to think about it in terms of your digestive system. You're building this entire new biome in your intestines and stuff, and your body's things are fermenting and the bacteria are doing crazy things, and that's where you get a lot of constipation or gas or diarrhea or anything like that going on digestively. So not only are you getting rid of toxins, but you're basically building an entire new foundation to your health in your digestive system.
And it depends on how you do it. You talked about doing yours and you went completely cold turkey. The way I work with clients is I help them to gradually, we add things in so it crowds out. So those experiences aren't so severe, because what tends to happen with people is they start feeling terrible and they're like, "I'm done."
Yeah.
So, I help them to transition in a much more gentler way so that it lasts.
Yeah.
The only issue with that is it's so gentle they forget about the changes and they start feeling good and they forget about how bad they're feeling,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So some people, like to do it.
Digress.
You know,
Yeah.
Well, digress. There's some people, you know, want to just do cold turkey, but most people who do that, unfortunately, I find that they go back and it sets you up for binges. But when we do,
What sets you up for binges?
When you go cold turkey, most people
You mean
can't
when you
push.
stop eating the sweets
Try
and
to
the
do it all
toxic
at
foods.
once.
Yeah, do it all at once.
So you don't
often,
recommend then
I would not
quitting
recommend.
all sugars and then, you know, having raw vegetables and things like that?
It would depend on the person. I think you have to
Yeah.
know the person's
And also
history.
your environment. I mean, if
Yes.
you're continuing with your daily work routine and you're not having a chance to kind of set back a little bit. People do this in spas all the time
Right.
because they're in an environment that supports
Exactly.
them.
Exactly.
But if you're trying to maintain your family life and your work life and your social life and you're trying to do this at the on
And it's
top,
the holiday season.
Yeah.
then you know you're asking
Yeah.
for an awful lot. So I think generally it's easier to take the baby steps
Yeah.
and then feel happy about each step along the way and not feel like you're having to push yourself.
Yeah, because change is stress. Any sort of change, whether it's good or bad change, that's stress. So, you know, when you have this drastic change, you don't want all the other stresses of your life coming at you at the same time that you're trying to detox your system. That's why, you know, being in that sort of environment is way better than, you know, having all the stresses of your regular
Well, see,
life.
I have no problem when I'm at home. None whatsoever. When I'm at home, you know, I know what food is in the house. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
The minute I step out the door, come to town, you know,
Yeah.
go to the grocery store, whatever, I'm already, the everything permeates. And I found that, I mean, I don't know what slow looks like, you know, gradually doing something, because it seems that the moment I put something in my mouth that's sugar, that's it. You know, I go right off the deep end.
Well, and that's one of the things that I do when I work with people. It's not just food stuff, you know, as you and I have talked about, because the sweet, you know, yes, we want the sweet because we crave the sweet, but a lot of times it's something else that we're wanting. We want a connection with somebody, or we want a feeling that we're getting, and so we turn to food, you know, or we hate our jobs, and so, or we're bored in our lives. So we look at all of those things. It's not just the food. So, you know, what are you wanting to get right now out of this moment? And learning to be conscientious of that is huge when people are detoxing. It's not just the food stuff. It's looking at a lot of areas. So if you have the opportunity to go to a spa and really evaluate and look at what's going on in your life, that's great. Right. The average person doesn't, and we have to do it in a day-to-day basis. So cutting things out and learning how, let's just add in leafy green vegetables. And let's just focus on that.
Oh, so that's what you're doing. You're adding in.
Yeah.
Rather than, I got it.
Let's not take out. Let's just add things in.
You know, I'll suggest that at every meal, have something raw. It may be that sprig of parsley on the side of the table, but at least it's something raw. And at every time that you have an opportunity to drink something, drink water first. And then, all right, if you want something else, but at least you've gotten the water in.
Okay.
So it's that kind of small incremental work that eventually begins to establish a new pattern. And along with that, taking whatever you need to do in addition for supplemental help can make a big difference too, whether the nutrition.
Yeah, and I think, like we guys talking about, small changes are huge. We're a society where we love instant gratification. If you tell someone that it's going to take like several months for them to adapt all these changes, they're not going to want to do it, right?
And at the same time, you give them all the changes, and they say, I can't do it.
Yes. Right? Yeah. Because we don't want to do the work, and we want just this instant gratification. So let's detox for 8 days.
Well, irresponsibility is another word.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And it depends on how sick a person is, too.
Right.
And how motivated they are. If somebody is very, very ill.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's,
That's that, and a lot of people are. And, you know, Susan brought up the subject of water. Water is so important. Water is a big part of our diet. It should be. You know, we should be drinking at least half our weight in ounces of good, healthy water per day, and that doesn't mean tap water. Tap water is very toxic, you know, especially if it's the municipal water supply, which has fluoride and chlorine in it.
Not to mention all the drugs that were flushed down the toilet.
Exactly, exactly. That goes
that
right
they
through
don't
the
test
system.
for.
And something that you say that I always try to think, how are my clients thinking? And I think, well, now you're telling me I have to take all these enzymes, I have to go and buy water, I have to go and buy all this food. Like, how am I going to do this? This is so expensive. And there's a study that came out just recently that it's only to eat a health supportive diet, it's $1 more expensive. That's really not a lot when you think about the amount of money people are spending on medications, the amount of money that people are spending on you know, our phones and our TVs and our internet services and all. It's like $1 more a day, you know, to spend on foods that are going to create our health. It's really, so we have to dispel this myth that it's not, that it's, you know, that it's expensive to eat healthy.
Yeah, there's also, we have to say websites?
No. So you have been, we've been talking here about food for health, and I'm frankly going to re-watch this over and over again because I've learned so much today. And we have been visited today on our panel. To my right is Susan Dunlap, the Nutrition Information Specialist for Rebecca's Natural Foods. To her right is Terri Saunders, Certified Natural Health Professional at Sunrise Herb Shop. To her right is Heather Esposito, Food and Wellness Coach for Smart Sexy Living, and Robyn Coale, Registered Dietitian for Revolution Health Center. Now, you each have 30 seconds, if you like, to make any kinds of comments or summations or anything like that. And we'll start with Robyn.
Okay. I think, you know, everything that we said can become a whirlwind of lots of confusing information. And at the end of the day, if the only change you go home and make is to add more fruits and vegetables, particularly vegetables in your diet, even trying to eat one big salad a day, you're going to be doing loads for your health, just starting with that one change.
Okay, Heather?
The biggest thing, I think, first is deciding on who you want to be and knowing that you're not saying no to certain foods, you're saying yes to your vision of who you want to be. For me, I want to be smart and sexy. And so I'm saying yes to these foods that are going to create that, so I don't feel deprived.
Okay, Terri?
And I would just say pay attention to how you feel. When you eat a certain food that may not be good for you, see how do you feel about that? How does your body feel? Does it give you more energy or do you feel more tired? When you eat that food, does it give you a runny nose? That's a sure sign that that food isn't good for you. And like we've all been saying here today, you know, start small. Start with eating something healthy every day. And it's also important to vary your diet, not eat the same thing every day because that will develop food sensitivities.
Susan?
And I would say, recognize that you're not alone. There are many, many people out there who are available to help and support you. I mean, all the folks here are here just because that is something that we want to do and appreciate helping other people, just as other people have helped us in our journeys.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, I can't tell you how much I've learned today, and I thought I knew something in this context. So I want to thank you very, very much for taking the time to educate our audience on, I mean, you're all so amazing and so well-versed. I want to thank you very much. You've been watching What Wise Women Want from Comcast Channel 13 and in Charlottesville, Virginia. And we have been talking today about food for health. If you'd like more information, you can go to our website, www.whatwisewomenwant.com. Remember, wise is spelled with a Z. There you can find information on all of our guests. More information, you can contact them. They have contact information there, or contact us at the website. You can email us there or give us a call. And we hope you enjoyed our program today and learned something in the process. I know I did. And join us again, please, next week. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day and evening.